Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
So this is the third episode in a short series talking about the archetypical nature of the sixth cognitive function in the Myers-Briggs system.
And integrating it for career.
Yeah, that's a lot of things to say there. But what we're actually talking about, this is shadow material in our personalities. And this is the cognition that maybe we're not as aware of. And we, in the last episode, did some application of the four perceiving functions and what they looked like when they showed up in people's different personalities, the different personalities that use those functions. We're going to tune into the judging functions today and talk about all four of the judging functions and what they look like when they're in someone's personality at the sixth function, when it's associated with the archetypical energy of the witch cynics and all the qualities that comes with that.
Yeah. So as you just mentioned, Joel, this is our third and the final episode of this short series.
We'll see. We'll see. No, I'm sure it is.
I don't have another podcast worth of material, so I don't know how we'd make a fourth one. Not on this particular topic. But if you are confused about our language, if you're uncertain of which we speak, the topic of which we speak, you can go back to the first episode, which discussed the theoretical aspect of what we are talking about, which is that it has been mentioned in multiple Jungian circles that the sixth function, integrating it from our shadow, which we can describe in just a moment, but integrating it is a leverage point, particularly for careers. So we talked about in that first episode what it means to integrate the sixth function, what it means to have that function carry archetypical energy of a witch or cynics, why that's valuable to us as in our career, and what it means to bring it into our awareness as opposed to allow it to remain what's called disowned, or that we don't see that it's a part of who we are.
Yeah.
We also discussed that it's the quote unquote shadow or the unconscious version of our second function or auxiliary, what we call the co-pilot in the car model. So there's a relationship between that idea of sort of the more nurturing parental energy of the second function versus this more sort of withering authority of the sixth function.
Yeah.
And just as a sort of the Cliff Notes version, integrating basically means listening to this part of you as opposed to being dominated by it.
Yeah.
It means being aware of how it's showing up in your life and actively bringing those skills in through observation and watching ourselves behave in these ways, as opposed to kicking the can till later when the function's still going to have an influence over us. We just may be unaware of it and then not able to receive its rewards.
Yeah.
When we integrate the function, we get support and we get rewards. When we disown it and push it away and we don't integrate it, then we get undermined and sometimes punished by the function.
Yeah, and it's something that we often can look at in our career, our job, our business. It's an access point. It usually shows up there and it's really useful there.
Yeah.
I think if you're following along and you're like, well, what would my sixth function be? Because we're going to talk about 8 types today, basically. We talked about 8 types on the last episode. We're going to talk about the 8 types today that use one of the 4 judging functions as their sixth function. And so as you're following along, you're like, well, which one's mine? You mentioned the co-pilot, Antonia. In fact, that's where we, in our owner's manuals for all of the 16 personality types, we recommend that the best avenue for growth is starting with the co-pilot or the auxiliary cognitive function, because that's where it's basically the translator in your personality. And we talk about the 4 functions in the car model we use. There's your strong parts of yourself and there's more uncertain parts of yourself. And that co-pilot's a good translator. It helps you talk to the parts of yourself that are maybe a little unsophisticated or uncertain, and it can balance out your entire personality. It carries the archetypical energy of parent energy. And how you identify or know what your sixth function is, look at your co-pilot or auxiliary, and all you have to do is flip its attitude. So I give the example of myself, again, ENFP preferences. My function, my co-pilot, is authenticity. That's the nickname we've given it. Technical name is introverted feeling. Well, what's my sixth function if it's introverted feeling? Just flip the introverted to extroverted. Extroverted feeling, or what we call harmony, is my sixth function as an ENFP, and so forth. If you're an INFJ, let's just pick another random type. Your co-pilot or auxiliary cognitive function is extroverted feeling or harmony. So that means that your sixth function would be introverted feeling or authenticity and so forth. Just apply that to any type that you are. That's how you can find what your sixth function is. We gave all the math for that in the first episode in this short series, but just trust me, that's how it works.
Yeah. Well, and we've gone through all of these, all the types.
Yeah.
Or we went through the types that have perceiving functions, and we'll go through the types that have judging functions. So you'll find it pretty soon.
Do you have anything else you want to cover before we jump right into these?
Yeah, I just want to mention the character traits of the sixth function, and just as a bullet point.
Excellent.
To talk about like why it's beneficial. So the sixth function is known to help us tap into boundaries and limitations. So this is great for career because it allows us to not be exploited, but also not to exploit others in a business. It also helps us expose weaknesses, inconsistencies, and falsehoods, which is pretty good. Also, again, in a career context, it's good to know who you're talking to, whether or not you can size them up, have kind of a critical eye, and make sure that they are, that you're working with the right kind of people. It also allows us or helps us to have high standards and to tap into excellence. If we don't integrate it, this can look like perfectionism, but if we do integrate it, it means that we're just doing higher quality work and we've got an eye towards that. And finally, it helps us with accountability so that we can show up with more integrity in our work. Now, we did discuss in the first episode what it looks like when we don't have these integrated, how we can get punished by them. But the positives that come along with integration really make it so that as we go through these types, if one of them is yours and we discuss your sixth function and you're like, ooh, gross, I don't want to do that. Well, this function is working in you, whether you recognize it or not. So there's a lot of benefit to integrating it, to seeing it, to owning it, to listening to it, because otherwise all the negative stuff, that stuff's probably going to be visiting you.
Yeah. And one last thing, we do a lot of work in our personal life path mentorship around this, but I'll just mention it here. The function that is at the sixth position is not the same thing as the archetypical energy of the sixth position.
Right.
So you have an archetype running, you have some energy associated with it, and when it is activated, you tend to flavor or influence its energy with the cognitive function at the sixth position.
Yeah.
But they're not the same thing.
Yeah. And vice versa.
Yes.
The function is influenced by the archetype
Correct.
of the Witcher or the Senex.
But they're separate, so sometimes we can easily conflate them in our minds, but just know that those are separate energies, and that matters, maybe not for today's discussion, but it does matter in some personal growth work we do.
Well, it matters because not every time you're in your sixth function are you in a withering authority.
That's right.
You can use that function without it being a Witcher or Senex. And you can be in a Witcher or Senex archetypal energy, right? You could see it as our revenge part of us that casts spells on other people and curses them. We can do that without pulling on that specific sixth function, but they have a relationship with each other and they tend to influence each other.
Yes. So let's talk about extroverted feeling or harmony as the first cognitive function that would be at the sixth position. This would be at the sixth position for all ENFPs and all ESFPs, because if you look at their co-pilot, the co-pilot for myself and my ESFP cousins is introverted feeling, or what we call authenticity. And so all you do is flip the attitude to extroverted feeling or harmony. And this is the function we're going to be dealing with here. So let's talk about this. What does this look like for ENFPs and ESFPs?
Well, most of the time when an EFP type is using a feeling function, it's about what's resonating with them, right? Introverted feeling or authenticity is like, what's going on for me and how do I feel about it? And how does that inform my values around this? And what's my purpose in all of this? And, it's a more self-directed feeling or like evaluating. And that usually looks like values. What are my personal values? Extroverted feeling or harmony is more about group values or sort of tapping into the values of the collective and what's happening for other people and tapping into and tuning into them. So while an EFP might not find that to be a very attractive thing to tap into, there's actually a bunch of tools that come along with it and a lot of benefits. The first one is that when an EFP type really tunes into extroverted feeling or harmony, especially in a career setting, it helps them build rapport and trust. it's signaling to the other person that they care about them and that they want to make sure that lines of communication are open, that they're tuned into their needs and what's going on for them. So it can look like casual check-ins or basically making sure that the flywheel of the rapport continues on so that the other person feels seen, heard, valued, and stays in the energy of the EFP. There's also a heightened ability to feel empathetic. So introverted feeling has a tendency to be sympathetic, which is like what the other person is experiencing. You sort of find the equivalent of your feeling to that. But extroverted feeling like feels the actual emotion. It's kind of pulling in an empathic way what the other person is experiencing. And an EFP type has the capacity to do that. It's just that they have a preference for being more sympathetic and finding their version of the emotion. But when they develop extroverted feeling, then now they have that empathy to be able to, to not just for work colleagues, but also for clients, especially if they're in a situation or an industry that requires maybe a softer touch. And then it also allows them to be able to, truly understand what their clients or what their customers are going through and experiencing so that they can craft and tailor what they're doing to meet their expectations. There's also more inclusive decision making. So as opposed to like, this is right and I feel this strongly, so I'm going to go do it. There's more of a willingness to kind of listen to other people's feedback and what's going on in a bigger group. So the decision making is not so monolithic. And there's also a heightened ability to do conflict resolution. So it's not just like my way or the highway, which you wouldn't think is an FP trait, but it certainly can be. Like an EFP can be sort of like, well, no, this is the right thing, so this is what we're going to do. But with more extroverted feeling, there's a higher level of understanding and the ability to meet people halfway.
Yeah.
And then there's also a finger on the pulse of the culture, right? And the ability to align with culture, the ability to understand what's happening, whether or not you are employed by somebody or the employer or a team, a team leader or a manager or, just a person who's working someplace. There's always a company culture going around. And without extroverted feeling or harmony, it's hard to feel like you're part of that culture. But when you are, there's a lot of reward that comes along with it, especially if it's a good one. So that sixth function allows the EFP to be more of that company culture, to feel a little bit more like they're part of the group, which is good for, it's good for morale for everybody.
So these are more general principles of how this could show up. I think you have some hypothetical examples we could jump into.
Yeah.
Let's land this in a hypothetical. What would maybe an ENFP or ESFP? Let's start with ENFP. What would this look like? Like more of a real life scenario?
Yeah, you got it. So I just want to make a note. If you didn't listen to our last episode, examples are always my Achilles heel. I never have examples. People in all of my courses are like, can you give me an example of that? And I was like,
You're like a deer in headlights.
I'm always a deer in headlights.
You know it's always coming too.
Yeah, exactly.
And today you knew it was coming.
I knew it was coming in this series. So I already decided to have examples. I already set them up. So I feel very good. But it just means that I'm going to have to read them. As opposed to being a little bit more like free form, my examples I'll have to read straight from the cue card. But I have them this time and I feel very proud of that. So for the ENFP, I chose the example of an ENFP manager that notices a team member feeling isolated, maybe in a remote setting. And so they make a point of it to check in on them and make regular check-ins. And so they encourage that team member to share their personal updates before meetings. So the person really kind of feels like they're a part of the group. So it's not just about the EFP feeling a part of the group, but noticing other people who don't and then bringing them in. And so then now everybody feels heard. They all feel seen. They all feel like there's a camaraderie that, of course, helps with business efficiency in general.
Yeah. What about ESFPs?
So I've got an ESFP paramedic that not only attends to the patient at hand, right, as an early responder and the immediate medical needs, but also takes a moment to reassure the family, right? Maybe bystanders, family members, friends, calming the scene and making sure that the environment feels supportive. So they're not just taking care of the actual emergency, but making sure that the whole thing, the whole environment feels a little more settled and more taken care of. And so that brings a little bit more warmth and compassion to people who were in those situations. And then they're not just there to provide the early responder support, but also some emotional support.
As an ENFP, so EFP, I would also state that in my own personal career world, this has really helped me with like, I'll call it onboarding and offboarding energy. Sometimes I can walk into an environment or situation with a person and I am, because I can turn my emotions on a dime and like just be on, I assume everyone else can too. But a lot of people need like small talk and to warm up to the conversation and to have it framed and to connect first, then have the experience, and then some kind of a down cycle and like disconnection moment as well. Like the connection and then the disconnection for the interaction.
Yeah.
That's something I've learned a lot in my career, that I just used to go directly in, have the conversation with the person and leave. And it was like abrupt and difficult sometimes. So it's really helped me have more of a smoothness to the way I interact with people. It's not always perfect, but I've tapped into that energy. And I've seen other EFPs, and Ness used to be on our team, ESFP, did a very similar thing. She was really good at making sure that all the things around the interaction were in place too, not just the thing itself. I think she was leaning a lot on this energy when she'd bring that up. So I think that's something that EFPs have available to them through this process.
Yeah, I would agree.
What about some of the resistances that maybe some of these types would have? So I think like I would resist this in the early days.
Yeah.
Like, why do I have to spend time ramping someone onto the conversation off? Can't they just know that I'm well-intended? Can't they give me the benefit of the doubt with my good intent? Do I have to signal all these things? Do I have to do all these extra emotional and relational things? It feels like it slows everything down. The interactions are more sluggish. I'm coddling people. Maybe that's how I'd represent it to myself in the early days. So there's like this reluctance and resistance maybe to go here. What can we say to somebody that's feeling that?
Well, I think another reluctance might be that you're being controlled by the group.
Oh yeah.
Right? That you don't get to just have your own authentic, honest expression
and the
as
group's
an individual.
Dumb. They don't have good, smart, like that's how you represent it, right? It's dumb. It's like, it's not thoughtful. It's not as good as it could be. It was just my idea or my thinking.
Or just controlling
Yes.
or whatever. Like there's always some reason
they want some
why
outward behavior that doesn't make any sense.
Why the culture or the group is not ideal. And so there might be a lot of reluctance to develop this part because it means that it's like, why do I have to why do I have to meet them where they're at? Why can't I just be myself in this interaction? So there can be a lot of reluctances, and understandably so. But and with all of these, by the way, every type is going to have a reluctance to develop their sixth function. And there's good reasons for it, right? Especially on a subjective level. It's like, well, why should I have to do that? I do this better. But remember, it's not a matter of, and I think you laid this case pretty well in the last one. It's not a matter of not doing your sixth function. It's a matter of not doing your second function. It's not a matter of abandoning introverted feeling or authenticity in this case. It's a matter of bringing extroverted feeling as a support to it, like as an extra tool. And as a cautionary tale, if an EFP doesn't, what they'll find is they'll find a lot of people around them feeling unsupported and low morale, even though the EFP might be totally shocked by that, totally surprised. Aren't I bringing like a good energy? But if they're not bringing a collaborative energy, if they're not bringing a cultural vibe that can be sustained when the EFP is quote unquote, out of the room. If the EFP is just solely relying on their own feeling function to fuel all of this, their introverted feeling or authenticity, then whenever they're gone, it dissipates.
Yeah.
But extroverted feeling or harmony keeps that vibe going. It turns it into a culture. And so the EFP now can like come and go.
Yeah.
And the vibe or the good feelings can remain. And so you're losing that piece if you don't develop it.
So from the EFP's experience, it's like being on stage and generating the energy that the audience is responding to. And that's the cultural tone of the room because I'm performing this out. I'm expressing this out and I'm creating the energy of the room. Well, you're saying it's a nuanced shift. That's so natural, I think, to EFPs often that they don't realize they're even doing it that way. They think it's maybe more collaborative, but it truly is collaborative. It's like coming down. It's like playing in the orchestra more than being the conductor.
Right.
In that. Like you're just one of the orchestra members and it's like you're tapping in and you're tuning into all the emotional and cultural experience of it all. But it also means that things aren't as dependent on you though too.
Yes.
Because when I'm on stage, this is personal. Like when I'm on stage casting forth that good energy, I like the fact that I'm important in the room and I'm the one setting the tone. If I was just among the crowd, I would feel diminished. I'd feel like not as important. And so this is one reason I reject it or I tend not to go toward it is I I like to be the most important, influential person in the room. Like that's unconsciously and consciously a drive for me.
Yeah.
I think a lot of EFPs would resonate with that.
Yeah. It just means that everything hinges on you too.
Correct.
And so
in career and work, that could be tough.
That's right. Well, it doesn't honor the boundary setting, the limitation.
And you'll get burned out.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And
we all need help.
But
we all need collaboration.
Extroverted feeling of harmony is the thing that helps bring good limitation, good boundary setting. And also to give good boundary setting on how much you give. I know a lot of EFPs that way overgive, way overgive. But if they bring this part of themselves in, they'll see how much they'll like experience it relationally, how much they're overgiving, and they're more likely to set a healthy boundary.
So let's switch gears here and talk about the next cognitive function of extroverted thinking or effectiveness. Mm-hmm. So now this is going to be the sixth function for ESTPs and ENTPs. Hey, you're an ENTP.
That's me.
Or at least you have ENTP preferences. So as we talk about this would make sense because the co-pilot for ESTPs and ENTPs is introverted thinking or accuracy. So if you flip the attitude, the sixth function is to be extroverted thinking or effectiveness. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about how does this look for these types as a sixth function?
Well, this might be the most obvious of all of them because
for career, right?
Yeah, because extroverted thinking or effectiveness is like the get it done function, right? It's like make things happen, project management, progress, and it's resource management. So I would actually say that one of the reasons why when I was first presented with this idea, the reason why it was hard for me to understand it is because mine was so obvious, whereas everybody else's was really opaque. I was like, I don't understand how introverted feeling, right, which we'll get to in a little bit, but how developing introverted feeling as your sixth function is going to be a leverage point in career, or developing extroverted or maybe extroverted intuition or whatever. But and so in some ways it was like a bit of a disservice, but mine's real obvious.
Feels really straightforward.
Real straightforward. This is not going to be very complicated at all. So how does extroverted thinking or effectiveness help ETPs? Well, we're more efficient project planners, right? We're doing more setting clear, achievable goals, using metrics to track progress. We are a little bit more accountable to the ideas we've put forward because now we have to put them on a timeline and do resource management.
So why is this not my experience of any ENTP at all ever? If this is so helpful. I'm half kidding.
Right. Well, for the same reason why it's not common for EFPs to develop extroverted feeling. It's the same thing.
I know. I tease.
Very limiting. But there is a lot of benefit. Pragmatic problem solving, operational optimization by learning how to do things in a linear structure, getting data-driven feedback loops. So one of the biggest challenges with introverted thinking or accuracy for all TP types is that we hold everything in our head and we don't necessarily do like a feedback mechanism. We just kind of we feel like we just figure it out. But there's extroverted thinking or effectiveness almost immediately goes to feedback, right? Creating feedback loops, making sure that you're tracking things with metrics, and or getting feedback from customers or clients, not just thinking you know what they want. That's the hubris of introverted thinking, is just assuming you know what everybody else is thinking and what they want. And this forces you to actually get other people to say, no, actually, I want this thing, or I want this thing over here. So there's a lot of benefits that come along with it, for sure.
I think one of the other things this can help ETPs with, ENTPs or ESTPs, is interoperability around thinking. Mm-hmm. Because you have interoperability around your relational part, that extroverted feeling harmony, tertiary or 10-year-old. There's a lot of relational ability to connect, and it's kind of a part of you that you see as significant. It's childlike, but it's significant. But this allows you in a career or business context to be informationally interoperable. Mm-hmm. So all the information that other people need to execute on your ideas or your thoughts, you can give them, something simple like taking all the great thinking you have, paragraphs, and just creating like bullets. So people can just quickly see line items and organize the thinking because they can't hang with all that information. So it's a way to like simplify, streamline, synthesize, and interoperate information. Yep. I think that's one of the greatest tools it gives ETPs.
Yep.
Like I love when an ETP can take all the intelligence they have and then bring it down to something very tangible and actionable it helps the rest of us.
I'm laughing because this is like literally a conversation we had right before the podcast. It's like, why do you have paragraphs here? Why aren't there bullet points?
Yeah.
And all the information.
So let's talk about some examples though.
Well, I would say one more thing I would mention is also, especially since this is the part that holds people accountable, this is also the part that like does performance reviews.
Yeah.
And make sure that everybody is handling their tasks the way that they're supposed to, and that nobody's a bottleneck or nobody's dropping the ball. And if they are, that you're taking them to task. Yeah. So that's a big piece of it, because ETPs, like you just mentioned, with extroverted feeling or harmony as a 10-year-old or tertiary, it's kind of hard to do that kind of stuff. You're like, oh, that person's not going to like me. But this sixth function is this is the part of you that goes, well, I'm not here to make friends, right? This is my job. This is my career. And I have to make sure that we get the results that we're looking for. So I have to hold people to task. And that includes myself, by the way.
Yeah.
I have to hold myself to task. And I have to make sure that we're doing it in a linear progression, and that everybody knows what there's like the interoperability. Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. It's all clear. Nobody's confused, and that we're all on project. So I think all of those aspects as well are what really that's probably the most important part for an ETP, is to make sure that the interoperability also includes clarity of assignment and holding people accountable if they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Let's talk about examples, hypotheticals. If we were to apply this to ENTPs, what would the sixth function look like in a career dynamic?
Yep. So I've got an ENTP that's leading a project that oversees brainstorming, right? And they get all these ideas, which of course is something an ENTP is going to do. But then using extroverted thinking or effectiveness, like integrating that sixth function, means immediately creating a structured plan, prioritizing the best ideas, and assigning roles with deadlines. So that's not just like, wow, we came up with all great ideas, I assume that's all we need to do. It's like, no, also now we have to get to work and put some structure to it. And then with that organizational clarity, you ensure that the ideas are not lost, that now we can move effectively and efficiently forward, and we can go from the ideation into action and results.
What about ESTPs? What's a hypothetical way that we might see this show up for this type?
So I chose for an ESTP a restaurant manager that observes inefficiency in a kitchen, like say during peak hours. And so this ESTP, using extroverted thinking, might implement new food prep system. So like try a new system of, almost like an assembly line, or make sure that you've got designated roles and checklists, and improving speed, efficiency, order accuracy, like all the things that you care about that create higher quality, but you're doing it not just, like running around, making sure everybody, like on a one-to-one, making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, but you actually are setting up a system that's clear, where there's accountability in it, that everybody knows what their roles are. And in that fast-paced environment, which sometimes it's easy to just kind of everybody sort of runs around and tries to do whatever they can do, you turn all of that wildness of the moment into a system that's operating smoothly. And so that's one way that they could develop extroverted thinking, even in a high-paced situation.
Yeah. So I can imagine an ETP is listening right now.
Mm-hmm.
You can speak to this, Antonia, because you have ENTP preferences. And they're saying, yeah, that sounds nice to be extroverted thinking effectiveness in my career. But that sounds nice. Maybe I get some things done, but it sounds like I'm going to have to be stupid to do it. I have to dumb down my thinking. Like,
right.
I have sophisticated thoughts, and they need all of the thinking to be sophisticated. And if I bring them down to the level of interoperability or just get it done kind of energy, I'm basically making all this brilliance and this good thinking, I'm making it stupid in order for it to be functional. I'm not going to do that.
Right.
I'm not going to diminish my thinking. That's like the last thing I want to do.
Well, and I think the reluctance too is that you can't be as fast in your choices and decision making.
Yeah.
Like you have to think it out a little bit more. You have to
wait for others to like connect to it, interoperate with it.
And this one might be when you say, like this is going to make me dumb, I'm going to have to be dumber. I wouldn't have thought about it that way actually, but basically the way that I would interpret that is that I can't be as refined in my decision making because I'll have already front loaded it. Even when I get new information, I might still have to stick with what I've already decided in order to get to the end of the project.
Yeah. The blueprint has been made and we're building off the blueprint. You can't change the blueprint now.
Yep.
I mean, you'll change the whole structure of the building. So you're locked in and it probably feels restrictive to ETP energy.
Yeah, it does.
You can't pivot.
Extroverted thinking or effectiveness feels very restrictive. And it also kind of feels harsh sometimes because you kind of want to be buddies with everybody. And it feels like, no, we can't be as quote unquote friendly. We have to also be professional. So there's like a professionalism that it requires that you can sometimes be reluctant. The challenge, of course, is that it doesn't matter how many great ideas you have, and it doesn't matter how fast you move to get ahead of problems. If you don't have a smooth system, you probably are going to have a ton of failure points. So it's really like this is the function that ensures that not everything is falling apart all the time, that you're not just making sandcastles, and that keep getting swept out into the ocean. It ensures that you don't have a bunch of missed deadlines or you don't have a bunch of frustrated colleagues, right? Like this is the function that makes it so that you can actually truly show up on time with the work that you need to do, making sure that anybody else that you're responsible has done their work as well. And so, And so while there is reluctance, there's also a lot of undermining it will do. I mean, this is I think this is one of the better examples of what it looks like when we don't integrate this function because it's so clear cut. You see ETPs that have avoided bringing this into the last minute, and then now they're barking at everybody, and they're just kind of tyrants trying to make something happen last minute because things are falling apart. And you don't want to get to that tyrannical element. You don't want to become like somebody who's just, barking at everybody, trying to make something happen last minute. You want to make sure that, you kind of figured some of that out beforehand and you've smoothed out the system so you don't get to that place, where you now actually are a bully, right? Just trying to make something, like trying to save something that you could have saved it maybe through better planning before.
Okay, let's turn our attention over to introverted thinking or accuracy. Right, this is the function you use as one of your preferred functions, but for INTJs and ISTJs, this is going to be their sixth function.
Right.
And that makes sense because their co-pilot auxiliary function is extroverted thinking, what we call effectiveness. So extroverted thinking, if you flip it to introvert, it's introverted thinking or accuracy at the sixth place. So what does accuracy look like for ITJs?
So the preferred function of extroverted thinking or effectiveness, we just talked about it for ETPs, seems like it's the career function. So there could be some confusion as to why they need introverted thinking or accuracy if the other function is so good in business.
I'm sure they feel they don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Well, and I mean, that's understandable. I could appreciate why they would feel like that's not it's not as necessary.
Yeah.
And yet there's a lot of tools and gifts that come along with integrating this function. So one of the big things that introverted thinking or accuracy does is it questions premises. And while you can't question premises all the time in a work context, as an ETP, I recognize that that's the value of extroverted thinking or effectiveness. If we figured something out and it's working fine, then great. But every once in a while, you do need to question a premise. You do need to question whether or not the system is as effective or as efficient as you think it is, or maybe to reevaluate something that has always worked, but maybe isn't working as well. There is value to looking at things at a more principled level as opposed to just as a result level, and to make sure that your processes are kind of cleaner, right? Like the thing that not just the outcome is good, but also how you got there is good. And so there's a lot of value to introverted thinking in like more on in the moment analytic troubleshooting. Mm-hmm. Extroverted thinking or effectiveness is more sort of long-term strategy, but introverted thinking is a little bit more tactical. So being able to think in a more tactical way if a problem surfaces that you weren't expecting, being able to reduce some of the complexity down to its principles, to sort of its not just to its parts or not just to like the 1, 2, 3 linear progression of something, but also to simplify it by looking at essential elements and asking, well, is there a way that we could do this? Sort of, I think about we've used him so much in our recent podcast, but I think it's because you just recently read his book or a biography on Elon Musk. But this idea of like I suspect Elon Musk is using introverted thinking or accuracy. And one of the things that he seems to do is to go into businesses and just like go question the premise of like, okay, so how are we making this? Can we make it any simpler? Can we remove like this, sort of assembly line, or can we do it with these parts instead? It's an ability to look at the essential pieces and then ask questions about those essential pieces that, allows for maybe even, to look for leverage points.
Yeah.
To look for things that are absolute essentials and then get rid of everything else, even if what is happening right now is currently working.
Yeah.
Can it be even better?
Yeah. And to that point, I mean, regardless of what his type is, because the point is not to argue around Elon Musk's type, there's a story in his book where he goes into the Tesla factory when it's slowing down and he's like trying to outrun the short sellers in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And they set up a bunch of automated robots at the different points to put the cars together. And he goes in and he's realizing the robot is doing it slower than a human could do it. So he just gives the order right there on the spot. He's like, just rip the robot, just rip it out. And they're like, are you kidding me? We just spent like tons of money and resource and time hooking this up. Like, it doesn't matter. The leverage point is let's put a human in this spot, rip it out. They rip it out. They put a human in there. It speeds up the process. He doesn't care about the wasted effort or the spillage there. It's like about the leverage point itself to get it done. So regardless of his type, he's certainly under the influence of introverted thinking at that moment.
That's right.
And that's the kind of thing it could do. It can help you tweak the system to get a better result by focusing on leverage points.
That's right. Exactly. And there's a lot of value to that. Extroverted thinking left to its own devices can get kind of sluggish. It can be reluctant to let go of systems that have worked in the past, even if that's actually slowing everything down.
It just chalks it up to acceptable spillage.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that acceptable spillage doesn't have to be tolerated.
Exactly.
And the leverage point could fix it.
Yep.
And that's where introverted thinking or accuracy can come in for an ITJ.
That's right.
So what are some other qualities that this can show up for?
Well, I would say another one is imbuing planning with intellectual rigor,
mm-hmm.
and then making sure everybody's being a critical thinker. So there's been some business initiatives that a lot of major companies have adopted that feel like they sound like they're good. They feel like that's what you're supposed to be doing, but they do not parse critical thinking. And so being willing to be sort of odd man out and go, I don't think this makes sense. Like the thing that like sort of the fad, like, cause just like societies and cultures go through fads, businesses go through fads too. They have something that will sort of sweep the business world, or like, everybody's doing this thing now. And if it's like, well, this other company's doing it, it's working, so we should do it because it's working for them.
Yeah.
That is often true, but sometimes it's not.
It's like working from home, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Like the business, like, hey, the pandemic had us all working from home. Let's just keep this rolling.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not all go back to the office. And then they realize, well, maybe this isn't as leveraged as it could be. Maybe we're missing some key components or some core principles here.
Well, and for some companies, it might work perfectly, but for other companies, it's a total disaster. So introverted thinking, like it will encourage critical thinking to go, well, how is this system different than that system? Just because it's working over there, it doesn't mean it's necessarily working over here or will work for us. And you want people to be clean thinkers that are willing to push back at quote unquote common wisdom or the current faddish wisdom.
Either direction.
Yeah. Yep,
okay.
You got it.
What else?
No, I think those are, I could probably figure out more.
No, let's then apply it to some examples. I know we have hypothetical examples.
Yeah.
Let's start with INTJ.
Okay.
What would this look like in a real world scenario, hypothetically, for INTJs to tap into this energy?
Yeah. So I've chosen an INTJ financial analyst, and how introverted thinking could help them spot inconsistencies in, like, say, quarterly reports. So digging into the data, isolating the issue, creating new models to ensure accurate future forecasting, and doing this attention to detail, not just in a like introverted sensing tracking way, but like in a critical analysis way, where they're not only correcting errors, but also improving decision making that's based on these reports.
Yeah. Okay. What about ISTJ?
For ISTJs, I've chosen an interior designer for ISTJs that would use introverted thinking to find unique solutions when designing functional but aesthetically pleasing spaces. So bringing sort of a level of precision into their work, allowing or they're sort of using that complex problem solving that introverted thinking can bring in to maybe use the space with more creativity. Maybe focus on sort of the coherence of a design choice and making sure that the solutions are practical and tailored, and also making sure that everything feels sort of meticulously planned out, but also functional.
Yeah. I can imagine an ITJ feeling like this part of themselves, this sixth function energy, could be overcomplicating things.
Mhm.
Like that might be how they represent it. Like, I'm not going to go into that energy. It's going to overcomplicate the thinking. I need to actually make my thinking even more simple here for us to be able to execute on it. I don't need it to be more complex. I need it more simple. So I'm not going to go there and bring more complexity. And also, it may feel very disruptive because now you're asking premise level questions. We've already decided this. Like, I'm sorry, but we're already into this project and you ask this question now, it's going to hijack me. So I can imagine ITJs push this energy away for both of those reasons, at least, if not more reasons.
Yeah.
And not want to go here. This resistance can come up.
Yeah, it doesn't. Oftentimes, it doesn't feel like it's worth the ROI of the time. Yeah, for sure. And that it tends to be a little bit more tactical. So it feels like it's anti-strategy, And like you mentioned, it's like, well, no, we already had the strategy of the robotic machine. So we should stick with that because we spent money on it. And this tactic of like throwing a person in, that, like you said, that can feel kind of disruptive.
Well, and also it's like, okay, well, that might help us today, but we didn't have a person hired for that for tomorrow. So,
right.
It's like, you're making changes without a strategy in place. You're going to cost us money, energy, and time.
Right.
Let's just keep, even there's a little bit of spillage, just keep what we have so we know it works.
Yeah. And it's a good time to remind everyone that you're not exchanging your second function for your sixth. You're keeping your second function. Like the ITJ can keep extroverted thinking or effectiveness as their primary way of doing things, but they're bringing the sixth function in to support it. So it's almost like the afterthought. It's like, well, we've already got this established and we know this is working, but what could I be looking at this critically and asking if it could work better, right? So it's not abandoning one for the other. And it's important to remember that for all of these six functions. This is meant to support what's already there, not to replace it. But at the same time, if an ITJ doesn't bring in this function, they have a lot to lose because, we're still using this part of ourselves, the sixth function part. But again, it's a matter of listening to it as opposed to being dominated by it. So if you don't bring in introverted thinking, you might be missing critical details of a complex plan. You might have flaws emerge in implementation that you're not sure where they came from because you didn't give it enough of a critical eye and you didn't have enough analysis in the beginning. You also might be reluctant or will be reluctant if you don't develop this to question the premise of something that worked before but now has become deeply flawed. And that happens. Like things change over time. And if we're not looking at them with a critical eye, we might miss when it's sort of hit its shelf life or when we need to pivot or do something else because we're not paying attention to those things. We're just relying on whether or not it worked before. So there's a lot to lose if an ITJ is unwilling to develop introverted thinking in a more, conscious way.
All right, let's turn our attention over to introverted feeling or authenticity. So this is going to be the sixth cognitive function for the IFJ personality type. So INFJ and ISFJs will both have this as their sixth function. That makes sense because their co-pilot or auxiliary function is extroverted feeling or harmony. And if you just flip the attitude from extroverted feeling on the sixth function, it's introverted feeling or authenticity. Now, I have heard so many INFJs and ISFJs in our personality life path mentorship program, in our coaching, in our personality profiler training, just in general conversation with them. I mean, I can't tell you how many have said, I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know what my motivations are, what my desires are, what my intents are. I know what everybody else's are around me, but I don't know what's going on in here for me. And I really struggle with it. Can you help me? Can you help me know what I care about? What's for me? Right? You've heard like millions, I'm exaggerating, but as many as we've had in our groups and everything, we've had so many IFJs report this, but this 6 function can really help with that. And I think let's talk about some of the qualities of this. I think this is a lot of access to what's going on for you as an IFJ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a sense to people with IFJ preferences that introverted feeling or authenticity is self-centered. And so there's a little bit of a, and I wouldn't say self-centered necessarily in a, like in a bad way. Like when an IFJ really dives into that part of themselves, it like truly does and starts to integrate. I don't think they feel like they become self-centered people.
Yeah.
But that first feeling that this is self-centered sort of creates a lack of permission to go there at all.
Yeah.
And for some other types, developing the 6th function isn't a matter of permission. It's a matter of like sort of getting over the distaste of it.
Yeah.
For IFJs, I think it's more giving themselves permission to have to dive into what's going on for them.
Yeah.
Even if they're not tuning into other people.
Can I add a nuance in here?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm right. I'm not an IFJ.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to hear from IFJs, ISFJs and IFJs to see if this resonates with you. I'm going to posit something and I'm curious to see how this resonates. I don't think it's self-centered holistically. I think what it's more like place in line energy. It's okay to go there after everybody else and everything else has been taken care of.
Right.
And at the very back of the line, once I've handled all of that, I do give myself as an IFJ, somebody might report, permission to go there to tune into what's going on for the self. But the problem is I never get there because the line is so long that every time I think I'm close, the line fills up again with needs or people need something. And so I wouldn't say that it's always just definitively selfish. It's just that it's in sequence. It comes after everything else. And so to prioritize that and bring that to the front of the line feels kind of wrong and bad, I think.
Right. Well, and I think this is why the 6th function is so great for IFJ types is one of the things that the 6th function brings with it is boundary setting and limit setting.
Yeah.
And so I think introverted feeling is such a great way for somebody with IFJ preferences to, to set limitations, to go, I think I'm being asked too much, or I think maybe I'm asking too much, right? Like there's like a way to be able to determine like when should I be saying no, or when should I be okay that somebody else said no? Because if there's this sense that everybody should just always be putting themselves at the back of the line, then nobody gets to say no because it's nobody's turn ever, right?
Yeah.
So there's a real helpmate energy to this function for extroverted feeling, like the 2nd function. Like when an IFJ brings this 6th function in, you can really tell that they've started to go, well, maybe my experience is just as important. But there's also other things it brings in. It brings in something that's more values driven, which means that if the IFJ is offended, they'll give themselves permission or capacity to speak up about it. And I don't mean like offended, like triggered offended. I mean like if the company is doing something that they can't stand behind, then maybe they can push back. Maybe that this is the function that allows them to give some pushback or to speak up about it or to just go, I don't think that this is my thing, right? Like, I don't think I'm going to be okay with this. It also means that they can help create, because they are going to still use extroverted feeling, they can use more of a purpose-driven or create a purpose-driven culture where we're tuning into why we're doing what we're doing, right? It's not just because we've all shown up and we're here to serve, but also we have a stake in this. This means something to us in some way. An introverted feeling or authenticity can help the IFJ figure out what that purpose is for them. Like, why are they doing it? There's also an ability to add extra emotional insight into what's going on for people around them. Just as we mentioned before, for introverted feeling, for EFPs, extroverted feeling helps them get a little bit more empathy, right? To kind of tune into the group at large. But for an IFJ, introverted feeling allows them to not just feel the group at large, but kind of tune into individuals and figure out what's motivating them, what's going on for them individually, what's happening not just as they're a part of a team, but also what's what are their unique talents that they're bringing? What is the expression that they're bringing that that makes them a good, good for this part of the team, or maybe they should be sitting in this seat. You know what I mean? It's like more of a talent scouting.
I can totally see how that would be helpful in a career or a job environment for IFJs.
Yeah. And then also nurturing some authentic self-expression, which can be very helpful in a career. Bringing the full self, valuing their own perspective. So speaking up, right? And this is great at times when an IFJ feels like, we mentioned before, when is it time to ask for a raise? When is it time to set limitations on how much you're working? When is it time to go for the promotion? Introverted feeling or authenticity will be like, will allow the IFJ to tune into what they want and then give them permission to ask for what they want.
Yeah. I think it's a very important function. Let's talk about some of the examples. So let's start with INFJs. What's a hypothetical an INFJ might find themselves in, or let's just pick a scenario to show how this might look dynamically. Yeah.
So for the INFJ, I chose the example of an HR director handling a sensitive layoff. So this is something that a lot of people have had to do, and IFJs can be very difficult. And sometimes an IFJ might go to, say, introverted thinking or accuracy to be sort of cold and scientific about it. But if they instead bring in introverted feeling or authenticity, they can ensure that the process respects and honors the other person's dignity. Yeah. So as they're going through this transition, they can offer support and resources, and they can also, sort of help the team go through difficult times by sort of tuning into what's going on for each individual person. So as opposed to kind of getting cold and calculated, which sometimes they feel they need to in those tough situations, this ensures that there's not too much distance because they're trying to protect their own feelings. They don't need to protect their feelings. They can bring their feelings in because they're used to doing that, right? It's like the IFJ is not afraid of or INFJ is not afraid of their own feelings in this situation because they've been fostering the sixth function. And so they can have that extra layer of sympathy and empathy in the situation as opposed to having to go disconnected and disassociated.
Yeah. What about an ISFJ?
So I chose an ISFJ financial aid counselor. So working with students and emphasizing or empathizing rather with facing financial hardship. So it's not just a job. It's not just we push the paperwork through, but actually kind of like getting invested in individuals. And so advocating for special funding or scholarship opportunities and making sure that that these things align with the student's personal story, right? Like this is the trajectory they want to go. This is in alignment with what's going on. And so making sure that that person's individual needs and background is being sort of taken into consideration and not just going like, well, this is how you get financial aid, right? And fill out all this paperwork. It's like, well, what's going on, and tuning to the individual and going like, I think you should go out for this scholarship, or I think you should go out for this thing. And I'll help you get there.
Yeah. So if an ISFJ or INFJ is listening right now and we're talking about this, I can imagine there's a resistance to come back. Yeah, we talked a little bit earlier about some of the resistances, but I can imagine also resistances. Like, we're here to do something. I'm with the group. We're in harmony. Things are happening externally and people are feeling good. I certainly don't want to go and tune into my own feelings about things in a work environment. What if I feel bad about what's happening? What if I find something that's not like, I feel like it's out of alignment? That's going to disrupt our ability to keep cohesion, harmony in the group, get things accomplished and keep things moving. Everything's going to shut down. And then I'm going to be the person with quote unquote the need or the problem in the scenario. I don't want to be that. I hate when other people are selfish and center themselves or put themselves at the front of the line and disrupt the whole thing going. I certainly don't want to add to that.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go to this energy in a work environment.
Yeah.
And I think that's the resistance that would come up.
And that's understandable. As I mentioned before, a lot of IFJs struggle with introverted feeling or authenticity because they don't feel like they have permission for it. That it's like you mentioned, it is going to be disruptive. Their feelings might be disruptive to the culture or the energy of what's going on around them. Yeah. The challenge, of course, and this kind of
feels
goes
selfish almost.
Exactly. This goes all the way back to the first episode where we talked about how these moments give us an opportunity to see where we're doing the same thing that we think others are doing to us. Because without introverted feeling or authenticity, the IFJ will not stand up or represent their own interests. They won't make sure that there is sufficient reciprocity, and that almost always leads to resentment. And when an IFJ experiences the resentment of not having a balanced give and take, of feeling too much one-sidedness in their life, it's impossible to keep their empathy going. It's kind of impossible to keep their extroverted feeling or harmony going, because it's just there's not enough nourishment back. And that resentment means that they lose their empathy. Like they lose the part of themselves that, that they're trying to protect, which is the ability to caretake, and not just caretake, but help shepherd a group. So while it's understandable that they would be reluctant to be more quote unquote self-centered, you have to be self-centered enough to make sure that you're getting your needs met as well. An introverted feeling or authenticity is a great way to do it, to tap into what's going on for you, how you're feeling, what you want. I mean, I think that's a big one. This function helps an IFJ know what they even want to begin with and how things are impacting them and affecting them. And so without it, the IFJ is far more likely to lead to burnout. Again, that sixth function helps with boundary setting. It helps with, having integrity in your work. Well, how do you know you have integrity in your work if you're not sure what you're aligned with, right? How do we figure out our integrity if it's not by going inside of ourselves? So without it, the IFJ will sort of inevitably become selfish or self-centered because they'll just lack the resource to give. Whereas if they bring it a little earlier and they actively develop it, particularly in a work context, not giving too much, asking for what they need, that sort of thing, then they're far more likely to have a sustainable experience with their extroverted feeling or harmony.
So as we talk through all these, we just went through last week around the perceiving functions and all the types that use that as a sixth function. Those are the six functions. And this week we talked about the judging functions and the types here. So if you missed last week's and the week before that too, we laid out the whole foundation of this entire conversation. We were a little leery to talk about some of these concepts, especially in the early days of Personality Hacker, because we're like, can everybody grasp all of this? This is so deep. We're talking about shadow work, right? Shadow material. And if this is something you're more interested in going down the road of, it's a little bit more advanced material, I recommend checking out our Personality Life Path Mentorship Program. If we're offering at the time of this recording, you're hearing this, take advantage of it. It is the program that goes into this shadow work, right? We take those 8 weeks, we look at every single function in your life and your personality, and we connect your relationship to it, and we give you exercises to test it out. And then we talk about it, we unpack it, and we have a 3 or 4 day live event where we connect it all, make a systems map of your life, and give you action steps to take toward improving the things you want to improve, optimizing yourself for the goals you want to go for. And we really address this shadow material because it's such a hijack to what we want in life. Like it's so nebulous. It's so hard to see.
Yeah.
So that's the shadow stuff. I think a lot of people are ready for that. Mm-hmm. Most people need a place to start. And if you're maybe new or you want to start out and just start with something a little bit more accessible, we don't go too deep into shadow work around it, but we have our owner's manuals, one for all of the 16 personality types. This is a great place to start. We talk about getting into flow. We talk about that co-pilot being a translator for some of the best parts of yourself to some of the more uncertain parts of you. And then, how do you deal with trauma looping? How do you deal with getting stuck in a grip where your personality grips you and you're having behaviors you can't explain? Like, how do you set up your life to be ergonomic? And how do you create the ideal day you want to live? Very practical. Like, what do you actually do? When do you get up? How do you eat breakfast? What do you do throughout your day to support and ergonomically design a life that's tailored to your personality type? Again, these owner's manuals, they're very accessible, both with tuition and availability. Head over to personalityhacker.com and get yours for your type. That's a great place to start. Can't recommend it enough. And while you're there, you can let us know what you're thinking about this episode as we talk about this whole series. In fact, what's coming up for you? Are you resonating with some of this sixth function energy we've been talking about? Come over and make your voice heard. Leave a comment, ask a question, share your story about what you're resonating with here over at Personality Hacker after you get your owner's manual.
Yeah, grab an owner's manual and then let us know. Before we totally wrap up this episode, I just want to say that if we talked about your sixth function and you didn't identify with it at all, and you're like, ew, why do I have to do that? Why would I develop that function? Or why would I, why would I grow that? we're actually not so much talking about growth, a little bit about development, but more, again, I just want to remind people that when we talk about shadow functions, and shadow is just a fancy word to say anything we're unconsciously, we're not aware of, we're unconscious of, we're not aware of. This is a part of you that is active, and it's active in your career. It is already happening. It's just whether or not you're aware of its influence in your life. And so the recommendation is you start watching for it. We talked about ways that it can show up. We talked about ways that you can utilize it. We talked about ways that you can hone it as a tool. But as you do that, you're going to get feedback on your reaction and response to that particular function. And it's really important to realize that we're not saying pick up something that is unavailable to you, or like has up to now been unavailable. We're not talking about do something completely different. We're talking about watch for how this is already affecting you. And the thing about these shadow functions, which is a bit inconvenient, is that they can either support or undermine us. And they're already doing one of those. Like right now, your 6th function is either already supporting you because you're integrating it and you're using it as a tool and you've got a good relationship with it, or it's undermining you and you're unaware of how it's doing it. So the recommendation for, like, basically, it doesn't matter what type you are. The recommendation is anytime you have an opportunity to integrate some aspect of your unconscious, and especially in a practical field like career, where it's not so, it's like, it kind of feels a little less emotionally heavy like a relationship, or less emotionally heavy like politics, or all these other things that bring our shadow out. Career is kind of a neutral place, and it's something we all have to do.
Yeah.
So what's nice about the 6th function and in career is it's kind of a nice access point to the shadow at all. The stakes of career are high, but the stakes of bringing this in, those feel less high than watching your shadow in your partnership or in your parenting or in your family or in like the zeitgeist or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, this is a little bit of a better territory. So I can't recommend enough that you do some of the work we're talking about, that you are aware of it, because it's almost like an entry funnel to shadow work in general. And even if you don't end up diving too deep into that and doing a lot of integration, just doing the recommendation, just filling out the recommendation for tapping into your 6th function can be a game changer in career. And you can start, even if you're not sure why, you can watch that undermining energy leaving you, and you might just have a better time of it in career just in general, even if you can't work out all the math, because you have this part of you that's now supporting you, cheerleading, being a part, like an active, positive influence, as opposed to something that's taking from you.
Well said.
Thank you.
Let's wrap up.
Okay.
So if you like this episode.
Oh, that's me. Okay.
Well, I've already asked people to come over and make a comment.
You did. You said make a comment, and so it's on me. So what I'm going to say?
Come over and make a comment, leave a question, ask a comment. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, that's my cue. And then I'm supposed to say, and if you enjoyed the podcast, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or a variety of different platforms. If you leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, it makes me very happy, and I read everyone. And you can also watch us on YouTube. We have a video podcast. You might be watching us right now. And if you enjoyed this episode, you can like, subscribe, and hit the bell for future episodes.
My name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker Podcast.